Okay, call to order the meeting of the Caribou Planning Board and minutes of the March 4, 2015 meeting.
Make a motion that we accept the meetings for March 4th.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We accept the minutes of the March 4, 2015 meeting. Any discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimous. Old business, Chapter 13 rewrite.
I want to put out a question. And maybe if I'm out of order, then tell me and I'll shut up. But should we really spend a whole lot of effort on this until we see what happens with the possible secession?
It's going to be at least 12 months before we know what's going to happen with secession.
Yeah, but I'm still concerned about doing all this and then having to redo it in case something goes down.
But the majority of the secession territory is currently in an R3 zone, the rural, residential. The majority of what we're going to be looking at would be the urban compact zone, with the outskirts being one or maybe two districts or types of districts would be my guess.
Okay.
Is there a line that they're looking to break from at that urban compact zone line, more or less?
It doesn't quite match up. It's just north of the Caribou Inn, and then just south of the connector on Route 1.
Okay.
And then kind of it follows the connector out to the west and the river.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't it the east and north and east of Caribou?
Sorry, yes, the east. Did I say west? Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's northeast, well, and south. I mean, it's pretty much the proposed territory would be a horseshoe shape around the city of Caribou.
I couldn't understand the diagram that
But
I found. It looked like it was two completely separate sections that were trying to be one town with the rest of Caribou in the middle.
No, I can pull up the diagram.
I thought it
if
was
you'd
just like a big C,
not
backward
important.
C around.
it doesn't include anything to the west.
It's not important.
No, it's not at this time. No.
Okay. I had a question on what you sent us, which I believe is the rewrite. Under Section 13-203, establishment of districts, under the residential district, and I think the terminology is used elsewhere, it says certain additional uses which meet the requirements of this ordinance may be permitted. I'm looking under the R1 residential district about halfway down through. And when it says certain additional uses, it's kind of a vague reference, and I'm thinking, if we're trying to define, residential zone, should there be examples, or is that just kind of a crack the door for whatever may come down the road?
It leaves it open to whatever might come down the road, but really the land use tables where those specific examples would be displayed, which is not a part of the packet, but everybody should have a copy.
Yeah, that spreadsheet that's in the zoning
Right.
bylaw.
So that
Okay.
that spreadsheet is what that would be, and I haven't made any changes in this section of the ordinance, as we wanted to get the, see what other communities have done and that type of thing. So this is still how it reads today.
Okay, and I found it odd, 2 pages further on page 9, under F, RC2 Commercial District, discusses uses of commercial, but there's no mention of residences. And I would think that the RC stands for residential/commercial,
Right.
and it doesn't really say anything, and I don't know if we should have terminology in there or not. I just am playing devil's advocate, I guess.
Yeah. And that's what we're here to hash out. So.
So is this, that's what we're here to patch up, my questioning, should there be mention of that? You looking for some verbiage maybe to throw in there?
Right. If we want, we can
tweak the
toss out some-
language?
Right, that's the process that we're going through. If you want to toss out some
I mean,
proposals or.
The last meeting, we had talked about defining these first, right?
Right.
Before
And
plotting them on the map.
Before we do the map.
Yep.
And that's, yeah, exactly.
And I believe, I don't think anybody was hung up on the fact that we have to have all these same ones. We can get rid of a couple or completely rename them or make new ones and whatever.
In your research to gather the 215 pages for us, was there anything in particular that jumped out at you that, oh, wow, this is great, this is exactly what we need, or any, like I said, I haven't made it all the way through yet.
Right. I think a couple of things that I found interesting. One, with the, I believe it's Camden, the first one is the growth residential districts. And then they had the growth mixed-use districts. To me, that's kind of like the RC2 type things, or if we're going to do, like the C1 where you can do apartments on the second story, that would be a mixed-use type of thing. I like that type of format myself. And then there was a couple other ones. Contract zoning, I believe that was discussed in a couple of the examples. Trying to find.
I liked the new market zoning, which is after the Brunswick stuff. Like on page 30, 31 of New Market. I thought they had some nice definitions of, the beginning is all Brunswick, Maine, and then after you get past Brunswick, you get into New Market. Starts with a page 20, and if you go to page 30, and they make reference in their definitions of zones to the table of permitted uses, which we don't, which maybe we should.
Yep.
Well, we must do it somewhere. Otherwise, the table couldn't be included.
I believe that.
We have a zoning table.
Yeah.
Right, but is it referenced in the definitions of the different zoning districts?
No, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I mean, RC2 is an example of that. It's not listed in there to reference that zoning table.
I don't recall, although it's a couple days since I read our stuff, but I don't see reference of the zoning tables.
It would be in the section 13.204, page 18 of the packet.
Page 18.
Right, where it talks about the basic requirements in the districts shall conform to the applicable standards. And then page 19, where it talks about the district regulations and the land use table at that point in time.
As long as it refers to the land use table, somewhere in the document, you're covered.
For the sake of being redundant, should it be listed in every one of them, or just have it as the catch-all at the top?
Well, looking at the new market zoning, which I said I liked, they listed in each one. You know, look at page 30 and 31 of that new market. Uses permitted are listed in the table of permitted uses. As a matter of fact, they bold it.
So they bold the table of permitted uses, and then they get into the discussion on uses by special exemption. I don't believe I pulled out their table of uses, just the definitions. I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, if you do it as a catch-all or in each one. But having the table is a handy thing, because some
Yeah.
of these, they list out in the code or in the definition what's eligible, what's not, and that makes it a little more difficult to, the table at least gives you a quick bird's eye view of what you can do in there in all the districts.
It might be useful to have the catch-all at the beginning of the section rather than at page 19 of the section, so that people will know, permitted uses are in the table. They'll be alerted to go look at that, rather than say, oh, we've just gone through all these definitions. Oh, now we got the table to look at.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That makes sense.
So you suggesting that the reference on page, was it 19, be moved to the front end?
We construct some kind of a sentence that says that the land use tables define permitted uses for all of the defined zoning districts.
Where is the reference on page 18?
Page 19,
19.
down the bottom,
19 on,
land use tables.
oh, land use.
It's kind of a obscure
It says
reference.
See attached.
Right.
Do we want to start that off with the district regulations, and then see land use tables? Put that towards the front of it, so that calls attention to it, and then they can flip through and see where it's going to be permissible or not, by looking at the map?
You know where the place to put that, if you go to page 7 on that, and it starts out with, number 1, zoning districts. For purposes of this ordinance, cities hereby divided into the following zoning districts. I think some reference to.
Permitted uses within those districts are in the table on page blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And have
Because,
that regulations fall in below it?
you know, somebody who comes into the city office and says, okay, I believe I live in an R1, I want to know what I'm able to do, you know, give me the sheets of paper that deal with R1 or R2 or whatever they're in. You need to call their attention to the table right away, because if they just focus on, you know, a couple definitions, they're going to say, well, this is kind of vague, it doesn't tell me what I can or cannot do, if they miss the reference to the table. But putting, you know, the city is hereby divided into the following districts. Permitted uses are per the table of permitted uses. Or maybe you could just put, actually,
And that falls under 5B, if you look at page 19. It says land use in conformance with provisions of this ordinance are shown in the following table. So that part at the bottom where it says land use table, see attached, I think we would want to put that part where it's got 5 and 5B in the front.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Start out with the
Right.
fact that the table is where you're going to find what you can do.
you lost me with your 5 and 5B.
On page 19, it's under 5, and then it's got subsection B.
Right, right?
Move that to the beginning, right below where it says, you know, where you were talking with regards to,
Under
for the
zoning
purposes of this
districts?
ordinance, yeah, divided into the following zoning districts.
Unless you just take that bracketed land use table, see attached, and you put that,
But it gives them the definitions too that fall on that land use table as well.
Yeah, what does CEO mean? What does PB mean?
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
So you move that to the front, that gives them the meat of everything right there, and then they can read through and see where everything follows.
yeah, except CEO isn't defined. You know, doesn't say that the
So we
CEO
put-
is
so
the-
we can
is
put
the-
something
is
in
the
that
code
says-
enforcement officer.
Yeah, well, we can put in those too. That's easy.
Yeah. And PB, planning board. It'd be nice if the definition of each of those initials was bracketed right after their use.
Yep.
Uh,
But I'm wondering if we're overthinking the definition of the districts and trying to incorporate all the permitted uses into the section where we define what the districts are. Because in the section that we have, we're defining it in the first section, and then the next section, we're saying, these are the regulations for the districts.
That's the way I interpret that.
Right.
So you're saying the
Here's all the
regulations,
districts you have, and here's what, you know, and here's how we define them, and then in 204 is what's permitted and what's not permitted, and who can and who can't.
So, I mean, when people come in today and say, we want to do a daycare in an R1 district, we pull out the table and, you see is daycare allowed in R1, and it's with planning board approval. It's not, people don't so much worry about the definition of a district, they worry about the regulations in the district of what.
That's right. That's why they probably we should either condense the definitions or provide what they want to know up front.
Can we just
Is the
combine-
table, the down and dirty, the quick? You know,
Right, yeah, the table's the point blank,
Yes,
we
no.
want to, right, and it has all the districts all on, well, it's 3 sheets, I think, long.
Would it make sense to combine 13203 and 13204 together and kind of mingle everything together so it's all in one?
your 13204 is the regulations.
Right.
3, you said?
Well, 203 is the establishment of districts and 204 is the regulations.
Right.
I don't know about,
Have it fall under like establishment of districts and district regulations without creating a break?
you
So that way
want,
everything would be defined under each one?
you may have people who pull these documents up online. They'll go to the city website and they'll access this online to see what they can and cannot do. And so you want this table of permitted uses front and center early on, because that will give them a quick answer to their possible question. Yes?
Wouldn't you wanna define your district first, though, before you tell them what you're gonna do? Because the table doesn't define the district, it just defines what can be done in each area, and who can, who can't. So, in
Well-
other words, in an R1, you can have a residential dwelling, okay? And then in addition to what we would probably normally interpret as a residential dwelling, by permit, or by request through planning board, CEO, or whatever, you can also do this is an allowed use, for instance, the daycare.
Well, if
You
I'm,
already know you can live in the house and it's in a residential zone or anything like that. The next question is what is allowed, okay, based on the definition and then regulatory guidance being more definitive of that district.
by way of that thinking, then, the first thing they should see is the map. The second thing they should see is the table, and probably the last thing anybody's ever gonna read is these wordy definitions of what is the R1 district. Because they don't tell us anything. The only thing that tells us anything is the map, which says what's R1, and the table which says what you can do in R1. All right? The definition of R1 is cute, or not cute, that's not the right word, it's nice, but it doesn't tell us anything.
So, once again, I think we're getting hung up on semantics. If you go to the city website under code enforcement, there's a 4-page document that has the land use table and the definitions. It's got the land use table on top and the definitions on the last page. We make, exactly, just like that. So we make it as user-friendly as we can for the people when they actually come in and have the questions, because you're not gonna hand them a stack of papers and say, this is our ordinance. We wanna make it as user-friendly as we can, saying, this is what you can or cannot do, here's the definitions, and here's the copy of the map.
All I'm saying is that the ordinance itself should be written in the same order that you present stuff on the website.
And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think we're talking semantics.
What do you, I'd like to ask the two staff people here. I mean, what kind of questions do you field from people coming in through the door or calling on the phone? You know, people saying, I live, on this street, I want to open a beauty shop or a daycare, or I want to raise chickens in the backyard, or, and so do you have people that come in and request copies, or do they just rely on your spoken word to say you can and cannot do these things?
No, typically when somebody comes in, they say we want to do we're looking at this property, we want to do a daycare, for example. Pull out a copy of our zoning map, see where that property is, what zone it falls into, and then we pull out a copy of the land use table. And your property falls in an R1, you go down the line, planning board has to approve a daycare in an R1.
So you do that without going to the definition?
Right.
The table is your quick and easy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I kind of think that supports putting the table up front.
I was just gonna say, I mean, you've got the map in front, and then why not have the
Right, because you gotta flip back.
table?
Right next
You
to
gotta
it.
read through all of this other stuff to find the table, so why don't we put the land use table right behind the map?
I agree.
Yep.
To start it off.
And then
And
if
then-
somebody wants to dig down deep, then
Then
we'll
they,
have our descriptions.
then they start reading
laid out,
the descriptions and the regulations and the other stuff.
Right?
You know, you're absolutely right when you say nobody's going to read the nitty-gritty if there's a table that gives them a quick, easy answer. So. You want that in the form of a motion, or?
I don't think we need a motion. This is a working session.
I should have said yes, that would have been fun to see how he would have worded that.
Well, now return to Bob.
You diabolical person, you.
Well, so we want the table up front. So then back to the other Phil's point of, he wanted,
The regulations to
he
follow
wanted
with that.
number 5 to go with that.
Yeah,
But then, well, wait a minute now. Number 5 says district regulation, which is the same as the section title.
right. That's why I said incorporate at least part of that.
Oh,
into-
well, it's
into
kind of an
203.
introduction to the table. It's just kind of, the land use in conformance with the provision of this ordinance are shown in the following table.
Would have to go up front. anyway.
Right.
So that number 5 goes with the table as the introduction to the table.
Also, I would say with the ABC, CEO equals required by both site design review and permitted by, instead of CEO, we should write out code enforcing officer so people know what that means.
Yes.
and
I
you-
think we should put it in the definition, but leave CEO, so that's the way it falls.
Right,
Yeah.
but in the definition.
Well, either that or after, before the equal sign, open parentheses, code enforcement officer, close parentheses.
Yep.
Now, just out of curiosity, item C, NO, is that to mean no?
No.
Or is that abbreviations for,
Well, in the land use, it actually says no in there, and I mean, that's what this is.
No means no.
No is
Okay.
no.
Right.
well, the fact that the O is capitalized, would make you think that it's an abbreviation.
They're shouting.
Just like PB.
They're shouting.
Okay. Okay, so we'll put the, so there's no parentheses behind no. Or we could put, no means no.
You don't want to say not allowed because NA gets misinterpreted.
Well, not
as
applicable.
Not applicable.
Yeah. Well, so going back to, in our RC2, do we want to throw in a sentence about residences? RC2, commercial district?
That kind of goes back to the whole broader discussion, which I had hoped we could have tonight about what districts we want, what district names we want, how we want to structure it.
Okay, so I'm a step ahead of you then. We need to go back. I raised the question last meeting of why do we have an R1 or not necessarily an R1 and 2, but a C1 and C2? And was it an I1 and I2 that I saw very little distinction between a C1 or C2 or an I1 or I2, that
Right.
we only need a C and an I. We don't need a 1 and 2. And I think this is where we ended up with, you were going to check other
Right.
organizations to
Yep.
see what they had.
And I think looking at some of the other ones, most of them have at least two different commercial zones. One typically because the buildings built, in the early 1900s, they either shared walls or were built very close to the property lines, compared to today where you've got some space from the property lines to the building. So having the C1 and the C2 makes sense in that regards for setbacks. Industrial, having the two different zones there. Calling them both industrial might be a little bit of a misnomer. It's, a light industrial and a heavy industrial might make sense, and I believe those were some of the things. And I don't remember which one right offhand, but
I thought I saw under the new market zoning that the difference between their I-1 and I-2 was that the I-2 was more land intensive, something like a plywood or an OSB factory where they need, 35 acres to spread all the timber on. It's a much larger land using type of industrial zone, as opposed to a couple of factories that are 50 feet apart.
Which is in line with Austin's suggestion about light industrial and heavy.
Yep.
So is the OSB plant a light or a heavy?
That's heavy.
That's heavy, okay.
You mean the one in Easton?
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
oh
that.
yeah,
Something like that.
that's heavy.
Okay.
You don't wanna live next door to that.
right. I would think a light industrial would be something along the lines of like Porvair, where they manufacture things there, but it's not noise or a lot of noise or that type of thing. A heavy industrial would be
Stainless food equipment.
right. Heavy industrial would be like Huber or somebody like that, where they're, large facility.
So what's our?
Say, where are the I-2s right now?
What's our scrap metal yard?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, what's the scrap metal yard?
Is that considered a heavy?
Because that would be noisy.
That's in
Yeah.
an an I2.
That would be,
Scrap metal would be right about here.
so is your I-2 the equivalent of the heavy?
Well-
And the I-1 is the light?
It's the way I read it.
That's how I would interpret it.
It would make sense. It doesn't have to be, but um,
Well, so, this is your, you're more the expert on this than we are. What is your suggestion as far as for a community our size for zoning districts?
I would say that we would need the equivalent to a C1 and a C2, just for the setback reasons and the mixed use purposes. A R1 and an R2 seems to make sense to me, just because of the various different types of homes that you could have in either one that you might not want. If you're going to have a large new development with a lot of nice homes, from a zoning perspective, you don't want to be able to put a mobile home next to a new house for that type of reason.
You don't think we need an R3?
I think we need a rural something, rural agricultural or an R3 rural residential, to allow for farms and that type of stuff.
I kind of thought we needed an R1, 2, 3. It's the C and the I that I questioned. But then you have, your setback thing, it makes sense. Do you think, would you recommend an I1 and I2 as well?
I think it makes some sense. I don't know where, thinking about current infrastructure and that type of stuff, I don't know where a heavy manufacturer would go, so I'm not sure where we could really place an I2, if you call it the heavy manufacturing, where that would go. I1 with the light industrial seems like that would make sense, because we do have a fair number of light industrial type of businesses.
So, I'm just gonna throw this out there. Why would we call the airport area an I-2? Means
It's a great question. I really don't have an answer for you.
If we go by
I
these,
think Brunswick,
Yeah.
I think it was in Brunswick, I read that, I mean, they have an airport district. I mean, if we're trying to eventually try to do something with the airport, shouldn't we like create that district and come up with something that would help? Or
Yeah.
something there?
it sounds like some of these districts were defined, or not so much defined, but laid out on the map, according to the definition, by, okay, well, this chunk of land isn't close to municipal services, so it's I-2.
Right. I mean, if you look at that map, it's
Yeah.
pretty blotchy.
Well, the other I's was railroad. You get a lot of I, which is established by the fact of the railroad being there.
I wouldn't take that away yet.
No, I'm not, no. I mean, by the railroad is logical. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you would,
but the airport, that is a good question. I mean,
I think having an airport district makes sense, and Phil, I believe it was you at the last meeting that talked about potential uses for spaces where the trailer park, having homes that are connected to the airport. If you
yeah,
wanted
an
to have a
airport
hangar.
community.
Right.
And the other thing, which actually, at an airport planning meeting, and this may be 10 years ago, at the last time the airport plan was reviewed, the Maine Department of Transportation lady who was up, she thought we were missing a great opportunity by not having tourism headquartered at the airport, because we are such a drive from southern Maine, that you could fly people in and rent them a snowmobile, rent them an ATV, rent them something at the airport for them to go out for the day, and then they come back at night and they fly back home. That it's a great jump-off location for snowmobiling or ATVing, because she thought our trail system was phenomenal,
And it's linked right there anyway, isn't it?
and it's very close.
The access there.
And, I thought, she's got something there. All it takes is for somebody to set up shop, So part of your airport could be commercial, not industrial. It could be commercial, that you're into rental of recreational vehicles.
so we add a district, we add an airport district or something to do with that district.
You're saying we don't call it industrial or commercial, we call it
Rather
airport?
the industrial, yeah, because I think like I said, I hadn't gotten through all this thing, but I think Brunswick has
Brunswick.
a airport district.
I think basically along the same lines that you're talking, they just thought that maybe there would be some light industry spawned up around an airport, because in other communities you do have that.
Yeah.
That support the airplane industry, the sales and the maintenance and so on and so forth and stuff like that. But the other thing is too, is that businesses that generate up around the airplane industry, but I think a district, and
But we
you
can
define
define
your
that.
airport district as to what can be allowed in there
Right.
and what you don't want in there.
can
And if
define.
somebody wants to come in and do some light industrial type stuff, that might be an ideal place for it.
Companies, where there are airports that have regular air freight flights, for instance, companies like to co-locate there, so that they have easy access to shipping and receiving.
Yeah, it was Brunswick that has an airport approach overlay district anyway.
We've got a growth aviation district as well. This says the district is intended to accommodate primarily airport facilities and operations, plus businesses, industry, transportation, and distribution, so on, that rely on or directly benefit from the proximity to the airport facilities and operations.
So we want to do something along
Yeah.
that line.
Yeah.
An airport approach overlay has to do with, do you want to build a house under there?
Right.
Under the approach path.
And that might be a good thing to consider, for an overlay district of the approach path and the height requirements and stuff. That's all regulated by the FAA, but
Yes.
if we were to have something in our ordinances, it might make it a little easier for going forward if somebody has those questions.
Yes, Phil?
And while we're on the subject of the airport, I do believe that the FAA probably kind of sort of wishes that the trailer facilities weren't there anyway, correct? Or
Well, going back 20 years, there was supposed, the airport trailer park was supposed to be eliminated through attrition. And the effort was begun, and then due to turnover of city manager, that message was lost, and the effort stopped, and I don't know if it's resumed. I know that they would not allow any new ones to go in, and the few that were remaining, they moved them all to the north end, so at least they'd be together.
That's the last activity, and that was even supported with FAA funding to move some of that stuff. And yes, you're correct that as places become vacant and so on and so forth, they're not allowing the,
Yeah, as trailers fall apart, they're not allowing them to be replaced.
we've actually torn some down, 2 or 3 down, if I recall.
Yeah.
In the last couple, 3 years, maybe not
And-
much. But there's a couple of them up in the back near the fence that were a real eyesore, and the
Well-
Boys for Public Works had removed them, okay?
My vague recollection of the reason the FAA wasn't too fond of them being there was for safety, that they're afraid if some airplane, lost control and skidded diagonally off the runway, it could land on one of those trailers.
Exactly.
And so, my idea of the airport community wasn't where the trailer park is, it was up on the hill where the old beacon tower is, or was. Is that beacon tower still there? No, the old beacon tower, so that, Fred Thompson's farm, which was bought out by, Irving Cavendish Farms.
It's my understanding that stopped being a beacon tower when they got tired of replacing the wiring.
Which the
Kept-
plow
took
kept
up
pulling-
every spring.
kept
Yep.
digging up.
You're talking out in this area?
Yes, yeah, right under your finger, yep. That's where the beacon was, before they moved it to the top of the water tower.
I don't even think the tower for the beacon is there
I
anymore.
don't think so.
No, it's gone.
No.
There used to be a tower and a tree. Now, if they took out the tower, I wonder if the tree is gone. There's one single tree there.
I think they took it down too.
I haven't been over there in a long time, so.
I haven't looked.
So you spent a lot of time up there last year, right, going back and forth, you would have noticed.
Oh, they're nice trails to go by. I run by them, yep.
Yeah. But anyway, so the trailer park was a safety consideration. They thought, FAA thought it was too close to the runway and some airplane could skid off and impact the trailer and, cause human injury. But, so, do we want to discuss, do we want to leave it as it is? R1, 2, 3, C1 and 2, I1 and 2?
My opinion, I think we've
And
got a pretty good foundation, other than
And then add an airport?
adding the airport district, doing something within the airport district, and then cleaning up the definitions of what we have established already, I think. I don't know, that's my opinion, but like I said, I haven't completely gone through this whole thing, but I think we've got a pretty good foundation.
Well, the other thing that we don't, well, okay, we've got an RC. Was that your mixed use?
It is mixed use, but it's not quite the mixed use that I had in mind. The mixed use I had in mind was more of the C1, where you've got commercial on the main floor, residential on the upper floors. RC2 is more of I'm trying to think of a couple of, down by, on Route 1 where the golf station is, right by the Caribou Motor Inn, that's in an RC2 district.
Why is it RC2 instead of just RC? Is there an RC1?
No.
2 has to do with lot size.
Right.
The number 2 has to do with lot size.
Yeah, since the lot
Oh.
size requirements are larger than other commercial districts.
So if you're in a 2 as opposed to in a 1?
If you read R1, R2, I think you'll find
Right.
that there's something said about lot size.
Right, but I didn't realize that it, okay. Yeah, RC2 says lot size requirements are larger.
Yep.
Than other commercial districts.
So it might make more sense to rename it from RC2 to a mixed use.
Well, I think most people would view RC as it's a residential/commercial.
Right.
I think the current label,
Yeah.
Which you can.
And would we have to make,
Air Farms has their little farmer market
Yep.
in there, and the propane tanks are in the RC2.
the quick stop is there?
The quick stop is there, and on the other side of Route 1, you have 3 or 4 different houses or
Yep.
residences there. So it
Well,
is,
you used to have Funland.
Yeah,
yeah.
That was fun.
it was. Would it have to be an RC2, or we can make it like an RC1? I don't understand where the 2 is coming up with.
Well, like he said, the 2 is typically involving larger lots than a 1.
Right, but we don't have any other RC districts. There's only the RC2,
Right.
So if we were to name it
RC1.
R,
Well, just
or
call it
mixed use,
RC.
or RC, or
Just call it RC. And I don't understand why it's got the word commercial. I mean, RC2 commercial district. I mean, commercial is redundant of the C.
I think it's more that it's
Oh,
a
yeah,
commercial
but that's everywhere.
district with,
C1 commercial district, residential district.
with residential mixed
So
in.
then they should have called it RC2 residential commercial district.
That's how it's labeled on the
But I
map.
think the purpose of the RC2 district is to have it more commercial than residential. While residential is allowed,
Okay,
it seems
so-
like the purpose behind it would be that it's a commercial.
The residential is okay, is peripheral or whatever you want to call it.
It's an existing use.
If you wanted to open a business and you wanted to build your house on the same property, I think that that's probably what the original intent was, so that you could live right next door or something without it being incorporated in your business. Just as an example of probably one of the things.
Call it a CR.
Almost like where Mark Netto's place is. He's got his house there, he's got his shop there,
Right. That's
and that's in an RC2.
Mark says,
Yep.
Yeah, I think we changed that not too long ago, to be truthful. And we expanded the land use table out there to accommodate agricultural storage, because Irving put up their facility on the Buck Road,
Yep.
and then Ayers put up their facility further out there on Route 1 up almost to the, all the little brook that goes across there. And those were not on the table, so we included those, and I'm trying to think, if there's anything else that we did out there. No, I think that's it, but those were some of the things that weren't allowed out there that we changed so that could be allowed. And I think where Irving's was, it was commercial, and we rezoned that back to R3 so that they were able to build their data storage on that property there because it was zoned commercial.
You know, looking at the new market stuff, I don't think they call it an RC, I think they call it an M.
For mixed use?
Mixed use.
Yeah. I don't find an M1, but they have an M2. M2, which is on page 24 of New Market. Purpose of this district shall be to protect and enhance the commercial, social, civic, and residential functions.
What page was that on, Phil?
Page 24,
24, thank you.
M2 district. It's a little bit of everything. So I presume the M stands for mixed.
Yeah. I think renaming it to a mixed use adds a little more clarity, or, I mean,
Yep.
it's, takes away some of the ambiguity of an RC too.
And they have they've got some nice definitions, although I don't know if we want to go as extensive as they are.
I do like the way they put design standards in the definition of the district.
Because it's a one-stop shop. You get everything that pertains.
Exactly.
You got the M2 district, and if you read on, you say, oops, I guess I can't do a drive-through there.
Exactly.
And they also have all the way up, what, an M3 and M4 as well.
Yeah, their M3 though is a professional office space and healthcare.
And their M4 is just a district to provide ongoing use of a golf course, so.
Is the Caribou Golf Course in R3?
Yeah, I think if you look at all these examples, including our own, you'll find that some of the districts were named what they were because of what was there
Well, that's,
at the
And-
time.
and part of this, Caribou is struggling, economically. And if somebody comes in and wants to do anything, we're not gonna make it hard for them.
Right.
Which, some of this, you were questioning, should we bother to do this because of the cessation movement? I question how much of this we should be doing, because whatever it is we do, if somebody comes in and wants to do something contrary, we're gonna do our best to accommodate them. So, it's not like we can dictate, if you want this certain type of business, it has to be on this end of town, period.
I'd rather not do that.
I think we need to do that in some cases for certain businesses.
Well, sure, you're not gonna wanna put a pig farm next door to, a residential area.
Right.
But, and I would think that when you're talking a tight economy, home occupations make more sense, because then you don't have the cost of a house and your shop. Your house and shop are one and together. You're only maintaining one.
But you have to be careful with the home occupation, because the way that we define home occupation is a family unit, because once you start employing outside labor, then you fall under the different laws that govern what you have to have in your house, and then it takes away from the residential capacity. In other words, if you've got an employee working for you, then that puts it into what they define as a commercial operation, and then you have to construct that property to make sure that it's a proper egress, proper fire protection, and so on and so forth.
Handicapped accessible and
Right.
all the rest of it.
You open up a whole can of worms if you try and broaden, just as example, the definition of a home occupation. Because we never had that, so we did define it, and we did put it in there, but it has to stay in the family unit.
Maybe everything ought to be a mixed use with planning board approval.
We might need to go to twice monthly meetings in that case.
How much free time do you have, Phil?
Give us a lot of flexibility.
They'll thank you when you're gone.
Plan you just did back then.
Well, because we're trying to visualize a growing community when it's doing the opposite. So,
Well, I think if we set it up,
Want to clean it up and maybe
Right.
redefine some of the areas to
Right.
allow some of those things that
That's
you're
what I
talking
think.
about.
I think we've got it,
try to
and
loosen
we've got the
some of this
room.
terminology up, so it would allow.
And remember, the other thing is that this is a living document, and like you said, if necessary, you can make the appropriate changes, but you don't want to start bringing something from that belongs out here in here and mucking up the works. Spot zoning, so to speak.
well, but there was reference to contract zoning,
Yes?
where you establish a special use for that one and only
We read that.
entity.
Yeah, and then when that's done, it's done.
Yeah, when that
No
entity
turnkey
ceases to
operation.
exist, so does the special zoning.
Right.
Do we have contract zoning in our stuff?
No.
Well, we should. I thought that was a pretty good tool.
Years ago, there was some I can give you a little history on that. Years ago, there was some direction given to the planning board, and they couldn't come to a consensus as to what model to use to put that into the ordinance, so it never happened.
For contract zoning,
Yeah.
so the attempt to put it in was made before and it failed. Okay, well, I think,
It never came out of committee, to be truthful with you.
yeah. Well, I think my understanding of contract zoning is to allow spot zoning for a limited purpose, for a limited time, basically.
So somehow we have to have some controls so that there's a compelling reason to do it. And not just because someone comes in with an idea for a business. There's gotta be some way to review a business plan and make sure it's gonna be viable. I don't wanna be in the business of granting everybody with a bright idea a contract for zoning, just so they can go to some particular spot that they like,
Well,
and then find out that all of this stuff is gonna be 1 or 2 or 3 years and gone.
my impression of the purpose for the different zones is for peace and harmony. That's why I said you don't want to put the pig farm next to a residential area.
Right.
And you don't want a noisy, metal salvage yard next to somebody's house.
We already got that.
Well, but what I'm saying is, I thought
Thanks, Phil.
I thought the objective here is peace and harmony amongst your neighbors. And so, like occupations or like noise and traffic and those type things are together, and, the slower, quieter neighborhoods are together.
Right.
So there, what is the use of contract zoning then?
Well, as good as you try to write an all-inclusive definition, sometimes you may not make it loose enough, and you may have boxed yourself in. So by allowing the contract zoning, you may allow something that isn't a hindrance to the neighbors, but yet doesn't, could be a small, I don't know, commercial operation that isn't noisy or doesn't require traffic or.
Just playing devil's advocate.
I don't know if, I don't.
Can't you accomplish the same thing by putting in the table planning board approval?
No.
I was gonna say, I think planning board needs to have those liberties identified in writing somewhere. And I think that's where your contract zoning verbiage comes in. I don't know.
If you did what Bob said, you would end up, basically, you could end up spot zoning. So you would want something more along the lines of the contract zoning.
Which is more
Well,
formalized.
spot zoning,
Formalized, but what you have to also take into consideration, and I think some of this came up when they were looking at it the last time, is, for instance, the use that you allow in that contract zone may be by definition a commercial use that could be harmful as a result of, you wouldn't wanna put a gas station in some place on a contract zone because it may leave a contaminated area that you can't use in the future. All right, so with the application of what you're putting in that contract zone, you have to be careful of too, before you just, it's not something that you just have as a tool and say, oh, I'll just use a contract. You'd have to be,
Well,
you'd
I-
have to discipline yourself to make sure that you.
I
don't go
agree with you, but
overboard.
I don't,
Then you would lose the continuity of your zoning process to begin with.
I don't see much difference between the term contract zoning and spot zoning. As long as spot zoning by definition has a, if you stop using it, it goes away.
Expiration date.
But by that
Allow
same
you to
token,
expand that home occupation, see?
I think a contract zone would be better than spot zoning, because at least if the business stops, then that zoning purpose stops. Whereas if you're gonna rezone something from an R3 to a industrial, for example, the planning board, the council needs to approve that, and then 10 years later, they'd have to go back and change it back if they wanted to do that.
Well, not if the conditions of approval were that when the business goes away, that it reverts. I mean, you can always write that in, and that's tantamount to a contract, I
Okay.
suppose. So, again, it's semantic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, but in that situation where you establish those limits on the spot zone, who's gonna remember that 15 years down the road in per se? Whereas I think, I don't know if a contract zone would have more of a known expiration date. That, if it's a contract zone, then it applies only to the typical, to the current person, not to somebody he sells it to or whatever. I don't know. I mean, yeah, you could, I kinda like, back to the, and I don't know, on that, new market zoning stuff, I like the neighborhood convenience store written right into the R1 district, page 30. That's an example right there of a commercial venture in the middle of a residential, but it's for convenience. I don't know why they won't let them sell gas, but,
But their R1 is rural.
it's rural.
Yep, read the, read
Yeah, protection of rural unspoiled character and open spaces.
in the outlying areas.
So their R1 is not as dense as our R1. Low overall density.
Theirs would be probably more similar to R3.
So they get the numbers opposite ours. But that's an example. I mean, we used to have more neighborhood stores.
Yep.
Airport Market,
Jeans.
smoke shop. There are different convenience stores which are a convenience. And they don't necessarily bring noise. And you could have had Airport Market with a hired employee behind the counter. It wasn't going to really upset the neighborhood any, whether it was the owner or his, hired employee, which, your home occupation thing would disallow that. Because there's,
But at that time, it was a C2, I'm sure, up there.
Yeah, when the airport market was in?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you
'Cause it-
also had keep going, these,
Yeah, you had the mattress place.
ones there, too.
Because it's still zoned as a C2 up there.
well, so let's get refocused here. So the thing is to identify what zones we want and then review the definitions of each. Is that correct, Austin?
Sure.
Well, so is there general consensus on a R123, C12, and I12, and then do we want to call it an airport zone?
I think
or-
we should have it as they worded it. I don't think airport zone, I think if we did aviation zone.
I was going to say, or do we want to call it aviation?
Because it actually sounds more attractive.
Well, aviation is a broader term than an airport.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, aviation zone is good.
And then mixed, do we want to call that RC, do we want to call it an M?
I think M. We should make everything flow.
Yeah. I like mixed use or an M.
Yeah.
Just,
Do we
And-
want to do an I-1 and 2?
Well, if
I-
if Cavendish Farms wants to build a potato processing plant, we got to point them to a certain area.
Yeah, okay. I'm just thinking.
yeah,
mean-
well, it's real heavy land use, I think, as opposed to a sheet metal shop.
Right, because what, is the only I-1 is the one out off of the Grimes Road?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Matt's right behind you.
That's the old,
Yeah, out on the ground.
the old McCain's area.
Right.
That belongs to the
No.
Caribou Utilities District now.
Out
Right.
on Washburn Street, there's an I-1.
Oh, yep, there is.
Really?
That would have been Sears.
Behind Sears
Yep.
The packing plant?
packing
Yep.
and stuff, because
Yeah.
that was the potato processing plant, right?
Was that?
Oh, Simplot? No, that wasn't Simplot.
No.
No, right where Sears Brothers was.
Well, anyway.
There's still an active packing plant there.
He does.
Was
They
that what
pack
Jimmy?
broccoli back there,
Was
don't
that
they?
what
ship it
Jimmy
from
Bacon
there.
was asking us to fix? Was that what Jimmy Bacon was asking us to fix?
Actually,
across
what
the
he
street.
wants fixed is right over to Brook Street.
Yeah, he wants behind his house so he can
That's
have,
an R2 now.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I think he wanted an R3 to make his horse corral more
Which he's already done.
conducive.
Change his barn into change his garage into a barn.
Well, I think we let him do it. We told him we're headed in that direction.
Yeah, but I don't-
I don't recall.
I don't think we voted on anything there.
I don't recall that discussion.
I wasn't
Well,
here.
I think how we left it is, that was part of the comp plan, that we were gonna keep these care of.
Yeah.
You're working on that right now.
Yeah. So,
Well, so
That'll come after we define the zones.
I have an academic question for you.
All due
As a teacher, you would.
Thank you. Do you know how big Newmarket is?
Like population size
Yep.
or landmass?
Is it a city, a town, or a village? Because I look at all these definitions and they're talking about the village.
Yeah, they make reference to village a lot.
8,936.
Really?
With a 14.2 square mile area.
So it's comparable to us.
So they're just
Landmass is much smaller, but
Yeah.
they're within
2,000
1,000.
more than us.
Yeah.
Huh.
Okay.
Where is Newmarket? Is
New
that in
Hampshire.
Maine?
New Hampshire.
Oh, okay, that's why I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
When I put it out to the listserv, which is New England,
Yeah.
Newmarket was one of the ones that.
Well, I saw some other New Hampshire.
Dairy, New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Wow, we got a lot of dairy.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Pretty liberal down there, be careful.
I just suggest staying away from the Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's all I'm saying.
And Newmarket's not all that far from Portsmouth, so.
No.
Well, should we take the next 4 weeks to finish reading the 215 pages and make a list of what we think we ought to have for, because we'll see like the M1 and the M2, and we'll see that, and we can come back and say, these are the districts we ought to have, and maybe we can steal some definitions from within here, and
Yeah.
Do we want to label our districts tonight and then work on what we're going to put in for definitions over the 4 weeks? Is that what you're saying?
no, well, what I'm saying is we may not know what, had I not already read about the M1, I wouldn't be suggesting it. And so you gotta read through the document to know what is available, what other people are doing, and then we come back with an idea of, you know, Rs and Cs and Is and Ms and
It might be
A.
useful to do like a mixed industrial and commercial one, a light industrial and a commercial one. Looking at the industrial park out of here on the map, you know, that's where Pines has their offices right now, and Office Max.
Office Max.
Yeah.
Is there currently. So doing a mixed commercial and light industrial
That's an idea. too.
district might make sense as well.
The other thing, which I'll throw in there, is that we have is it a hospital district or a health district?
Health-related district.
And, yeah, health, H1, health-related district, intended primarily for health use.
That was to accommodate the fact that Cary existed.
Well, they needed a place to build a hospital. And I guess I would hate, you just mentioned Pines Health is, what is the zoning where Pines is now?
It's a C2.
They're in a C2 currently.
And is that an appropriate use officially, or is that special exception?
It's a spot zone.
Right.
Right.
And so that right there is a good example of why we want to loosen up our terminology, because I think, you know, to allow, I mean, you can have a health, take a look at Presque Isle. I mean, Tamick is on North Street. You know, you've got, well, we've got in the shopping center across from McDonald's, we've got County PT, and Tamick is there as well. And I mean, I think that health is not necessarily any different than most any other type of office environment.
It's a service industry, that's all.
Yeah, it's commercial.
Yeah,
And that may have been, that, where Pines is, may have been zoned as a C2 when Dan's was there.
So when I see this,
In moving and storage
Yep.
and Mecon.
yeah, when I see this H1, I kind of think, okay, intended for health use. Well, it doesn't mean we can't have health elsewhere in town.
No, it doesn't.
And I think it shouldn't be in a necessarily an H district. It could be in a commercial district. It could be in a C, office, you know.
Again, it's a commercial activity.
Right, exactly. And so
So,
I don't know if the,
And I think that's where some of the definitions, we're gonna have to have another long discussion on some of the definitions in our land use table, like personal service business, The dwellings, like we talked about the last meeting, we're gonna have to make sure that we look at the definitions that we have. Maybe we need to add a few more things into our permitted land use table, but make sure things are defined. Make sure our land use table has definitions for the things that we're saying.
Yeah, because there's a difference between the medical office and a hospital
Definitely.
in terms of land
Right,
use.
right, yeah. You know, because you can have I was gonna say, you can have a medical office building even in a noisy environment, but you don't want a hospital in a noisy environment.
That's right.
Yeah, because a lot of places today, their supporting services are located off campus.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's what Tamick did with like the Rustic Peas. They moved that completely out of the hospital, and it's all over there on North Street now.
Well, and it's not unique just to here. I mean, Eastern Maine Medical Center has got a big complex. I think it's out on, is it on Broadway or Union Street? You know, they're on the other side of town. They've got this, you go there for everything or stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
it-
yeah, go in for x-rays, pre-screening and things of that
Yeah.
nature.
But
and-
did they build it for that, or did they take advantage of available
they,
space?
they took advantage of available space.
Okay.
They took advantage of a shut-down shopping center.
Exactly.
Then they have the cancer center over in Brewer.
Exactly. And so those are events that we kind of have to keep in mind in, because people, you want to make use of your building stock that you have in place. So are we ready to adjourn?
You're
Or,
chairman.
well, I'm trying to wind it down. I'm thinking, you know, I mean, on the agenda, we had, I mean, our Chapter 13 rewrite's gonna go on into next meeting.
So it's ongoing.
So we're gonna read and come back for more further discussion.
And I did want to bring up the topic of the May meeting. From my schedule, I'm going to be out of town the first week of May and have family in town the second week of May. So I didn't know if the planning board wants to change our May meeting.
So you think of the 20th?
What's our, do you want to have one in the last week of April? Or is that putting too much pressure on everything you're gonna have to get done before you take your week off? Well, I'm being realistic.
I'm not gonna meet on the 29th.
Oh, you got that all figured out.
I do.
28 plus 1 is 29.
Right, it's my birthday.
Oh, really? Oh.
Bring cake.
Yeah, right. Big load of candles.
Oh, no, we'll just get the number ones. It's easier
Now,
that way.
we've got this rewrite, and then we've got other business as it presents itself. And there's, what's the, we had a proposed assisted living type complex. And is that, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to not have a meeting and delay somebody's project.
Right.
Do we know if that or anything else is going to be needing our attention around the end of April, beginning of May? Or should we just go to June, to the first week of June and skip May?
I'm not aware of any project coming down the pipe, but if something does, I'll certainly be in touch with you and we can call a special meeting if needed.
You know, you could always have a workshop and rehash some of this stuff that you've been going over tonight.
Have a workshop, in other words, we meet without him
Right.
and we just discuss our terminology.
Or do we even, I mean,
And if something comes up. and
That's a
it
good
has to be
idea.
done,
That's
you
probably,
deal with it.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's a good use of time.
Yeah.
So, all right, so why don't we schedule a workshop?
Thank you, sir.
And you brought me along.
I was going to say, we appreciate your counsel.
Because we could still have our May.
First
May
Wednesday,
6th,
May.
be the 6th.
Yeah,
right? I mean, or we could even push it back a day depending on what you'd be available for in case
No,
something
he's
does
out.
come up.
He's gone.
He's gone, he's out the first 2 weeks. He's
I'll be around May 4th,
yeah.
but if we want to keep it the same, I can watch the video after it's all done and Denise takes good
Well,
notes as
Denise will be, you're available, so you can write our stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's meet next time and the purpose, now, when you say workshop, educate me here. Does that mean we're on air, or we're not, or does it make a difference?
I know.
I mean, we're on air because it's a meeting which is supposed to be held in the public.
Because it's a meeting tonight, but as a workshop, you don't have to, I don't think the planning board's geared to have it on there unless they want to.
I thought that anytime we have a meeting, it's to be
Right
public.
to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's to
Right.
be
The
public.
public's welcome to every meeting that this
And
committee
if we
has.
have it on the same night, it's still,
Right.
still considered
Right.
a meeting, it's just.
Yeah, we
don't
can put it
want-
on air, I mean, they're just
Yep.
gonna,
And if new business comes up between now and then, we can put it on the agenda.
We're just gonna be hashing out this stuff.
Terminology, yep.
Yeah, I think that
Doing
makes
it right
sense.
now, so what's the difference
Yeah.
if you do it then?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
keep it the same and.
Okay, well, we'll meet again, and so the only agenda item is gonna be the Chapter 13 rewrite.
Unless something else comes up, but we'll keep the board informed and we'll send out a packet like normal.
Okay?
Okay. Any new business to come before us? Any other business to come before us?
did the life safety things get taken care of with regards to that apartment on Main Street? I know we haven't signed off on,
Yeah, the fire chief did his inspection, found a few things that needed to be corrected and gave them 2 weeks, I think it was, to fix it. He went back and did a re-inspection and
Okay.
everything was okay.
do we need to sign off on that? Because wasn't there a site design review with regards to that? If I remember correctly?
I believe you already signed it.
With conditions.
With the
Okay.
Conditions, and then, Chief Susie gave us a report to attach to.
I read
Okay.
that in St. Louis a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so I think we're good there.
okay.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Meeting adjourns.